for 2010 to 2015, Republican politics being defined by repeal and replace. As Trump took over the primary, that healthcare message got crowded out, and it very much became about immigration and law and order issues and trade even. And so he hadn't even really defined what he wanted to do. And if you actually look back at his rhetoric, it almost sounds like he's describing Obamacare in the primary. So that definitely set the table. You know, early on in the primary, you saw other candidates release healthcare plans that were supposed to sort of kind of set the table for where they wanted to be on this. And he was a blank slate. After multiple false starts, a repeal bill passed the House, it went to the Senate in like late spring, early summer. And for several weeks, it just was a mess. You could just not get 50 Republicans to agree on a replacement plan. You just couldn't do it. And so sort of their Hail Mary to get out of this conundrum is we're just going to pass this skinny bill, which is just a very narrow bill. It repealed the individual mandate and a few other things, basically the unpopular things that everyone sort of agreed would be fun to get rid of without really reckoning with the consequences. And that was not supposed to go into law. It was just supposed to be a vehicle to get into conference, which is when the House passes one bill and the Senate passes another. They create a conference committee with members from, both chambers to sort of hash out the differences between those two bills. And then there's a final bill that both houses pass. So it was really just kind of like an empty vehicle. But like I said, because it was so narrowly crafted, if it was actually become law, it would really be disastrous. And this plan was sort of like first broke in the press on like a Tuesday. And I remember reading it being like, this is insane. And by Thursday, it's what they were doing. And so that day was insane. Even before we got into the actual vote, the whole day was crazy. The final vote wasn't even going to happen till like 4 or 5 in the morning. It was just going to be the longest night after this insane day. So I actually was in the chamber really early before, I think there was maybe 2 or 3 of us reporters to kind of see the early signs that something was about to go awry and that John McCain was the reason that something was about to go awry. There's other members where it was like, well, Rob Portman really cares about Medicaid and Bill Cassidy really cares about pre-existing conditions. He never had like a policy qualm that any of us were aware of, but just that it was becoming increasingly clear he was uncomfortable with the process. And, even before we got to this sort of like finale of just chaos all the way leading up, it was very closed door. It wasn't like there were formal hearings on any of these bills the way Democrats had when they were beginning healthcare legislation in the Obama presidency. It was just all just make it up as you go. And so I think in that sense, there was a little bit of like, let's watch John McCain. And I think there was some infamous line that he told a reporter, like, watch the show. But I saw John Cornyn, who is the Republican whip, whose job it is to just sort of know what everyone's going to do on a vote. And when I see him, he looks pretty happy. And I'm talking to another reporter like, okay, well, John Cornyn looks pretty happy and confident. Like, they have the votes. This is going to pass. And then McCain comes in. He talks to Chuck Schumer, who's in there. He talks to John Cornyn. Don't know who he talks to first, but either way, you saw John Cornyn's mood just drop. And you saw Chuck Schumer just light up like a Christmas tree. And you don't want to assume too much because, like, it could be about anything. Like these guys, people try to lip read and they find out that it's like they're talking about their golf game. So at that point, I still didn't want to like assume this was like what was going to happen. But that's when the buzz started picking up. And what they basically did is they left to open one of these early procedural votes up for hours to try to flip one of the votes of the 3 no's, Murkowski, Collins, and McCain. And you could just sort of watch those interactions. I mean, there was one moment where you saw sort of McCain and Murkowski catch each other's eye, and McCain sort of signaled that he was a no and that he was going to stay a no. And, then it like becomes like, oh man, this actually might be what's happening. And, Pence was there. people were being pulled off the chamber. I think, Trump was calling people and it was this just concerted effort to try to flip a vote on these, floor maneuverings. And meanwhile, you're watching McCain talk to Democrats and Democrats getting really excited. And, I think there was hugs pre-COVID. And then it culminates to the final vote. And I think McCain actually, he missed the first, they just called down the names and he missed the first round where his name was being called because he was outside the chamber. And then he comes back in and he does that thumb down and, everyone just sprints to the exits to file their stories. But it was really, I don't know. It just feels like you don't always know when you're watching a historical moment in the moment that you're watching it. And that was what was cool, was that everyone knew this was historical and a big moment. And floor votes don't normally have that much drama. You don't usually bring anything to the floor until you have the votes. So yeah, it was crazy.